Well, hello everyone. Here to show you the Mizzou Small coloring activity right here. As you see right here is I went ahead and drew right here is a picture right here. Say as you see the Francis quadrangle is right here is the columns right here, and then you see right here is like would say is a drawing, sketch right here of me, and then that back when it's like been there a couple of times. Of course, when your friend going to college there, and of course it's like a couple of times. You say with my of course my parents it was, and knowing about the walking around say the college it was, and basically that the reason why picked that say that the word small it was is knowing about that anybody would probably think about it. It's a pretty big college it was, but on the other hand too that knowing about that that with the college it was that back then I would have been pretty small it was. I probably only weighed about maybe I would only been about maybe 11 12 years old at the time, and knowing about walking around you see the parts of you see of the park, and then of course different areas you see of the college it was, and that knowing about it with anybody will probably thinking about that hey that so far as small it's like that if anything that it has like maybe cause maybe a few small parking lots it is that maybe back then it was back in the early 1993 94 it was, but other than that you have right here is like for for small, and I can remember that it's like that whenever I used to when you walk around there, it's like knowing about with me that whenever I was back very young it was as knowing about doing a lot of walking it was, and then whenever one time I remember whenever I was walking say around campus it was, it's like knowing about it's like besides from what I can remember from beyond the two doors it was is knowing about that you have right here. It's like besides walking in between a few hallways it was, I can remember walking into say a hallway kind of like this right here, to where that there was like I say a door at about right here it was, and then of course there would be like which caused maybe a few glass windows at about right here it is, and yeah I if I can recall is like knowing about that a few glass windows, and then I can if I can remember right that yeah there would be about a hallway about right here it was. One time whenever I was down there off of Mizzou was, as there would be a few glass windows at about right there. If I can remember right, that there was also a place where you can actually maybe sit down and eat. That there was like maybe a few restaurants out there as well. But remember I remember that walking into a few hallways it was, and then out of those few hallways it was it's like other than beyond the two doors it was, or it's like where these glass windows it was. And I can remember that being there and just thinking about that knowing about that really well what is college. It's like you talk about, it's like a type of anybody were probably thinking about that were you daydreaming that long it was, were you daydreaming that long as knowing about that anybody were probably thinking about that if you go there and knowing about to me it felt like what you call is like maybe the say maybe the police academy or anything like that, a place to where that so far was school it was, type of school to where they teach you like which calls like a higher level and say of education it was. But anyway, that you have right here is like a building you say of glass doors right there, but anyway that you have right here is like go ahead and use like what says the brown, but right here is the columns, and knowing about that with anybody you think about it is like whenever you're young that knowing about whenever you were to look at the columns it was that knowing about that the last thing what I can remember was other than beyond the two doors was knowing about that with these columns that that they look like a pretty good size, maybe pretty big columns it was, and if I can describe maybe about what they looked like at the time, they were big and tall, and knowing about that if I can remember right, that I probably only came up to about maybe to about here, say on the columns, and I can maybe barely reach up and be able to touch the center part say of it, and knowing about with anybody you're probably thinking about whenever you're young and pretty pretty small it was, you were only about maybe 5 foot 5'6" or maybe 5'4" or something like that at the time, and then be like, hey, that if you too short, to be able to reach up, just to be able to sit down, right there on the colony area right there. But other than that you have right here is like with the columns, and with anybody that if anybody were to be going to that school, it was, and anybody probably think about, oh, they're not that small, but anyway, a couple times I've been out there. If most of us have seen it before, it's like on my YouTube pages that you have right here is like shadow of the columns, but basically this coloring talks about is basically about your creativity. It's knowing about. I was not looking at no picture whenever I drew this right here. So right now it's like that the columns kind of look like that they're out of bounds, crooked or anything like that. But knowing about that, like drawing it of course from an angle, and of course right here is the sidewalk, and of course at one time I begin to wonder if at one time that if there was like maybe a place where that you can actually pull up and park your vehicle right maybe on the grass, maybe right up here up towards towards the columns. That it was, I think, some drivers that allow that, especially if you're going to be a student there, that they would allow you to where that you can actually drive up, drive your vehicle up to say towards the column area it is. And then knowing about that, if you're a visitor or something like that. But anyway, you have right here is the sidewalks, and I'm just like thinking about back in maybe the 1950s and 1960s it was, is knowing about right here is like the sidewalk, and then you may have seen on the pictures before about maybe a few cheerleaders or anything like that, like for the Missouri Tigers it was. But basically about Mizzou Small, it was like I was thinking about maybe tiling this coloring right here of library, and then knowing about that the types of books and stuff like that maybe you can read. It's like if Mizzou were to have like what you call like a type of library maybe online to where you can read books, books will be available. It was. And of course right here is like, go ahead and add a little bit of orange right here for the columns. But anybody probably thinking about that with the columns though, that especially me, that at one point that to realize between like what you call like a college, such as other than Mizzou, or if it's Rolla University or St. Charles Community College it was, and you hear about it of course, especially whenever I was in high school, people talked about it, not really whenever if you were in grade school, or if you were at like in elementary, or if it was kindergarten year or anything like that, to where that they would ask you about what college you want to go to or wherever, and knowing about the type of college, and then it came to my it came to my mind, especially to whenever that if I remember right, that I talked to my parents about it, and it was like that yeah, if you want to go to college, let me know, and then I'll pay for it, and we'll work it out. And knowing about with me that back then though, that for whatever reason, why did I have my mind set up for college? It was in a lot of ways it was like that I just really think that it was all in a matter of fact about knowing about that aiming for a better education, and knowing about that yeah, whenever you're in school a lot of times is that you talk about that you want to be this person, you want to be that person, it is, and knowing about really in order to be able to get to that position, you really just had to go to it, the type of right college it was, the right university. But anyway, that of course anybody probably thinking about that, yeah, their uncle went to that school, so now I want to go to that school. Well, it costs money just to go. It is. Anybody will probably thinking about that, yeah, it costs money to go, so they're not going to pay for you to go. It is. But on the other too, that knowing about anybody probably think about it is like it costs money. How far am I going to get? It's hard. It costs money, and it's hard to the point where none of my other friends, whenever they graduated, of course, whenever they finished high school, that quite a few of them, they may decide to maybe go into the army, or they may decide, to run their own business or whatever you call it, and that they don't bother to go to college or anything like that. But quite a few people have asked me already about why is college your interest? It is, but so far as for better education it is, but mainly is this story right here is that if this was like what you call, if this was me right here, is walking up to the columns it was, and back then that this is the way I drew it, but back then I would have been a person wearing glasses it was, and knowing about with me that the columns were pretty good size, now some people may think about they're not that large, but they're not that big. We're talking about that back then that whenever they were like what you call like big monuments, of architectural art. It is big statue monuments. It was if anybody's familiar with like what you call like the maybe the nation's capital, or if it was the maybe the Empire State Building, or if it's the Statue of Liberty, or if it's the St. Louis Arch or anything like that, any other types of architectural buildings. It was the big architectures, like type of tall buildings. It was skyscrapers, but other than that you have right here is that the columns right here is basically that the times I went been out to the Francis Quadrangle. It is known by anybody probably thinking about that really this is no photo, huh? This is no photo. What is going to be like if you were to get a college degree? Then what do you think the photo would look like? And more likely I would probably tell anybody that really I don't know if I can actually draw something like this and actually show, if I were to get a job somewhere, working at something, and I don't know if I'll be able to show them something like this on their hand to that, knowing about that, that this is, this more likely, I guess, is not really a type of a diploma, and I really don't know if I would look at this as like what you call like a type of, it's like the type of architecture, and people probably think about that, with that type of artwork, that more likely that people would take interest in, and just knowing about that, the fact about that yep, and knowing about anybody who probably thinking about that the type of architecture that because that was like what you call like my field, and so far as study it was at first it was my first major study of course was carpentry, and I think of was acting of course, but it's like it was for carpentry that I wanted to learn how to build stuff, and of course with not really measuring, but mainly just want to learn how to build stuff it was. And anybody will probably thinking about that yep, if it's Raleigh State University or any type of college academy, it is knowing about, it's like so far as to answer the question to where, if there's any type of question to where who's paying for it, but on your hand too, that knowing about is like really about what your major is knowing about what you want to do, and knowing about anybody will probably think about if you want to get artistic and maybe draw something kind of like this. Anybody probably thinking about that, yeah, these columns right here, I mean, they look like little upside down pencils. It is just sticking in the ground with a big eraser on the top. But on your hand too, that knowing about anybody will probably thinking about, really it's about for good, for scholarship, say for education, for teaching you well, is so far as teaching you well, and then knowing the basis about is like that whenever if you were to go to school, it is then knowing the basics about that. If you were to go to any one of these college universities, it is that knowing about really that you used to be big, it's still big, but I'm like that I used to be small, and then now kind of grew up now, and anybody who probably thinking about that yep, if it's the airport or wherever it is, that leaking or cavity or anything like that, anybody who probably thinking about that for what I'm thinking right here is knowing about that whenever I was in school, that there was a time for whenever I was in school that I wanted to get it done and over with. I didn't want to really did I really want to think about college at the time? And I thought about college and knowing about the fact about that when people go, then of course that they get an education. It is for what they want to do. And say a lot of people probably say you get a better education, but On the other two that knowing about is like anybody will probably thinking about that with your education, and that knowing about is like, you know, for the types of acknowledge that you can get, you know, for whenever you thinking about what you want to do, and then knowing about, you know, for what you can draw out. It's knowing about, you know, this is, you know, I'm a big kid, look what I can do. You know, I can write with my hand and so can you. But other than that, it's like talking right with the left and the right with the right. It's like talking about, it's like, yeah. But other than that, it's like talking about the detail right here for the shadow, and of course right here is like the sidewalk, and talk about it's like, you know, for the walk, say of the zoo. But other than that, I can the walk, you see, of the zoo. Other than that, it's like talk about for Mizzou, it's like you right here the columns, and anybody probably thinking about that yeah, like you see on a further, see a part to see of the building right here, that, you know, you would have like what you call like the sign, you know, that would represent, it's like, you know, for the columns right here. But other than that, it's like talking about this, like, you know, for the column area right there, and then all about it's like that the reason to why maybe you want to go to college one of these days. It's like, and no, you know, for the zoo. But other than that, it's like talking about, it's like for the Mizzou Small, is talking about, you know, from whenever you know, from whenever you're young, you know, maybe you may be extremely curious to know about, you know, what's this or what's that, is knowing about, you know, for education of the zoo. But other than that, it's talk about, you know, for Mizzou Small, talk about the coloring activity.